Marco Rubio accidentally makes a great argument against US dollar hegemony. Some empire managers are so brash about wanting to rule the world that they'll occasionally voice their positions so straightforwardly it sounds like an anti-imperialist said it. We saw just such an instance last Wednesday during a conversation between empire propagandist Sean Hannity and warmongering Senator Marco Rubio on Fox News. So frenzied was Rubio in his vitriol about the rise of China on the world stage that he accidentally wound up providing a very good argument against the hegemony of the US dollar. Rubio began with a rant about how the US is in a conflict with China in response to a question from Hannity about whether Xi Jinping is preparing for war with America. The bottom line is we're in a conflict, and I think we have to start talking about it that way, Rubio said. I was very young, obviously, at the end of the Cold War, but it's been about 30 years since there was another superpower on the Earth that was in conflict with the United States. We are back in that place. We need to stop pretending that's not the case now. Hannity repeated the soundbite he's been pushing for the last few weeks, saying that Russia, China, and Iran are a new axis of evil. Then Rubio made a very revealing comment about a recent deal that was struck between China and Brazil. Just today, Brazil, the largest country in the Western Hemisphere, cut a trade deal with China, said Rubio. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there will be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them. Rubio is not the first U.S. imperialist we've seen expressing concern about the U.S. dollar losing its position as the dominant currency of the world, not just with regard to China and Brazil, but also between China and Russia, between China and Saudi Arabia, between China and India, and between India and Russia. The dollar is America's superpower, Fareed Zakaria writes in the Washington Post. It gives Washington unrivaled economic and political muscle. The United States can slap sanctions on countries unilaterally, freezing them out of large parts of the world economy. And when Washington spends freely, it can be certain that its debt, usually in the form of T-bills, will be bought up by the rest of the world. Now an increasing number of nations are eager to find alternative financial systems to insulate themselves from Washington's willingness to use sanctions as political leverage, writes Jamie Seidel of the Murdoch-owned news.com.au, quoting an Australian Strategic Policy Institute think tanker as saying, Chinese authorities were shocked by the seizure of the Russian central bank's foreign exchange reserves following the invasion of Ukraine. In the event of a Sino-American conflict, Chinese assets would be similarly vulnerable. The other day, Pentagon insider and D.C. swamp monster Elbridge Colby spotlighted a concern on Twitter that the U.S. might not be able to finance a war with China if the U.S. dollar loses its status as the world's reserve currency. There's a tweet by Elbridge Colby pointing out a comment that was made to him on Twitter. Would the U.S. even be able to finance a war with China if the dollar was no longer the world reserve currency? The U.S. has engaged in a tremendous amount of manipulation to secure the dollar's position as the global reserve currency and all the power that comes with it, and has used it to fund a war machine of unprecedented might and to inflict starvation sanctions on disobedient nations around the world. It is a weapon, and U.S. imperialists are bemoaning the looming loss of that weapon because they want to use it on many more people for the advancement of the interests of the empire. It seems unlikely to me that the emergence of a multipolar world will in and of itself produce any kind of wonderful utopia, and as Professor Richard Wolff explains, the dollar's decline could potentially give rise to a lot of economic chaos and suffering. But at the very least, the fall of U.S. dollar hegemony will deprive one group of psychopaths a powerful weapon they should never have had, and could even end up impeding the empire's ability to ramp up for a global conflict between major powers, which must never occur. In any case, humanity cannot continue along the trajectory it has been on, and any divergence from that trajectory opens up the possibility of real healthy change. Here's hoping Marco Rubio is given a lot more to be upset about in the coming years.